Hi, everyone. Welcome back to On the Vanguard. My name is Dr. Anicca Harriot, and I'm so excited that today we are joined by an incredible panel of scientists, activists, inventors, and experts for our conversation that we're calling At the Intersections. So we all represent different intersections of identity, and we're going to meet here together at that crossroads to talk all about how we can best support each other. So thank you to Dr. Lisette Torres-Gerald for giving us the cue to provide visual self-descriptors at the start of our podcast. I think we're definitely going to start doing that regularly now. And so for myself, my name is Dr. Anicca Harriot. I am a Black woman. I am wearing a burnt yellow sweater. I have about shoulder-length dreadlocks, which are currently up in a ponytail. And I am wearing daily earrings that sort of look like little afro picks that I got from a local artist in my city. I'm going to throw it over to my co-host, Dr. Arianna Long, to introduce herself and get started introducing our guests.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Dr. Arianna Long, and I am an astrophysicist, a mentoring expert, and I'm Chief Programming Officer at VanguardSTEM. I am a light-skinned Black woman. I have long dreadlocks and dark lipstick. You can't see much behind me, but what you can see are some tropical flowers that my father mailed me, which was very lovely, and a black and white sketch of the planet Jupiter that I made a few years ago. I'm really excited to be here and to chat with all these incredible panelists. I'll go ahead and get started. One of our first incredible panelists today is Dr. Itzy Morales Pantoja. Please, Itzy, tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background, and how you got here to this current career stage.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here and excited. I am Hispanic with light skin. I am wearing a black jacket, sporty looking. My hair is long and dark. What can be seen is are a lot of green plants and a couple of red pot plants. I am currently a postdoctoral fellow at Johns Hopkins Center for Alternatives to Animal Testing. I am originally from Mexico City. And interesting aspect of my journey is that I dropped out of high school in order to get a full-time job, in order to help support my family, which was struggling to make ends meet. And so then when I entered the United States, I started at community college, but since I didn't have a high school diploma, I had to do first some remedial courses like English and algebra. And so after 2 years at community college, then I transferred to the University of New Mexico, where I majored in biology and minored in chemistry. And so during my last 2 years at the University of New Mexico, I joined a research lab doing multiple sclerosis research. And this was a very significant point on my path, on my career, for two reasons. So one, my sister has recently been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and which was the reason why I actually decided to go into research. And two, this experience was very powerful, because it had, I have the mind and the heart in the same place. And so that experience and what I was able to accomplish during this time as an undergrad gave me the drive to stay, and decided to go into research, and accepted the offer from Hopkins for my PhD in cellular and molecular medicine. And so during this PhD, I had the privilege to work with cells that came directly from multiple sclerosis patients. And this also cemented my desire to stay in doing the research that I was doing. And as I was working with these cells and analyzing their ability to become a type of cell that is very damaged in multiple sclerosis, that also gave me a very important moment where I realized that we needed more complex human brain models to study neurodegeneration. And so that gave me was the logical transition for me to going to do research on brain organoids to study neurodegeneration. And that's the background. And that's what I'm working right now. And actually very proud is that I'm advancing the technologies to bring and to create human brain models that are more physiological relevant to study the diseases, and also on the way to do that, sparing the lives of animals that otherwise will be used in research.
Thank you so much for that awesome quick story of your background, Itzy. I remember hearing this in a talk you gave maybe last summer, and I have always thought of you as this really incredible researcher, and to hear the background of how you were able to achieve all of that was really inspiring to me. And so I'm really glad to have you here today on this panel. Up next, we have Dr. Lisette Torres-Gerald, who is a scientist and a scholar activist focused on addressing racial and gender inequity and ableism in science. Dr. Lisette, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing now, and how you got there?
Sure. Before I begin, I just want to acknowledge that I am located in Lincoln, Nebraska, which is the land of the Otoe, Missouri, Ponca, Pawnee, and Omaha tribal nations, as well as many other tribal nations who passed through. And a physical description: I have short, curly brown hair, dark rimmed glasses. I'm a tan Latina with a purple shirt and pink flowers. And the background is books, but that's totally not my real background. I'm using a virtual background. In terms of my work, I am a senior researcher at TURC, which is a math and science education nonprofit. We are dedicated to equity and looking at equity issues within STEM. My team, I have the opportunity and the honor of working with Dr. Mia Ang and Dr. Nuria Jamat Pascual. And our team essentially looks at the intersection of race and gender primarily, but since I joined the team, also disability in STEM education spaces. I actually am recovering aquatic ecologist. So I started out in the field of aquatic ecology as an undergraduate, got my master's in zoology, where I did further work looking at animal-mediated nutrient cycling in human-made systems like dams, reservoir systems. Then I went all but dissertation in aquatic ecology and left the field due to, as some of you may know, some of the sexism and racism that exists in ecology, and transitioned initially to student affairs, but then I was encouraged by mentors of color to go back and get my doctorate, and was blessed with meeting Dr. Nana Ose-Coffey, who was leading the Social Justice Certificate program at Iowa State University. And under her guidance, I was allowed to, in the School of Education, I was allowed to focus all my studies on science. So all my work is looking at the sociocultural aspects of science. And since then, I graduated and am now working for TURC with a brief stint as a writing center director. So it's a very windy path. All that to say is, I think I'm most proud of the current work that I'm doing with a grant that I received through the National Science Foundation, the AZEL program. I am the co-PI and Director of Inclusive Communication and Capacity Development for the Reimagining Equity and Values in Informal STEM Education, or REVISE Center. So that's the equity work that I get to do on top of all the other projects that I'm doing right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisette. That was amazing. I really geeked out in the beginning when you mentioned that you work with Mia Ong. I've been familiar with her work for years because sadly, sometimes to thrive in these spaces, you have to become experts in other areas. And so I remember looking up her work in grad school and feeling very much seen and validated in many ways. Up next, I would like to introduce Danielle Boyer. Danielle is a 23-year-old Indigenous robotics inventor and advocate for youth. And Danielle, I have to admit, I Googled you before this, and I've been very excited to meet you. So could you please tell us a little bit about your journey and your background?
Bonjour, hello, my name is Danielle Boyer. I am Anishinaabe, which is an Indigenous community. I am mixed and light-skinned. I have long dark hair that is way too long in braids. I have earrings by the artist Indie City, which is an Indigenous artist, and I'm wearing like a checkered headband and glasses and nose ring and AirPods. I think I look a bit like a hippie, to be honest, to paint a picture. And I am randomly enough in a farm right now, and next to me are horses, which is random because I stopped here like on the way to take the call. So I'm just on a road trip next to horses. So yeah. I'm currently based in San Diego working with local tribal communities on robots and cool things like that. I'm a youth robotics designer, and basically what my work is helping get accessible technical education into Indigenous youth's hands. I grew up under the poverty line and not being able to access like science or tech education. And my little sister Bree was like obsessed with like science and tech and things and really wanted to be like Iron Man or build things like Wall-E and stuff we saw on TV. And we just couldn't afford the opportunities that were available. And so when I was 10 years old, I started teaching. Long story of how that happened. Not well, but I started. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot in education. I learned that there's a lot of gaps, especially that affect my community, from lack of representation to lack of internet access to lack of STEM programs as a whole to lack of funding. Like there's just so many things that can feel impossible sometimes to get a step up. And so I started inventing robots when I got a bit older. It was definitely not an easy path to get into that and to found my own organization to bring free robots to Indigenous youth and make that a resource. It was a lot of fighting like the sexism in STEM and the racism in STEM and all those things. And to date now, we've sent out over 20,000 free robots to kids. And that is just the most exciting thing in the entire world to me. We don't just do like STEM education robots. We also do language revitalization robots. And we fund our students to develop their own technical educational projects and inventions and things. And it's been such an exciting journey. And yeah, I'm just really excited to be here today and to be on a panel with such amazing people.
Thank you so much. We have so many great people here. I'm very excited to just be in the room with such amazing minds and to keep having this conversation. So as we introduced ourselves, y'all kind of gave some of your background, some of your maybe self-identifiers. But one thing that we are interested in is, first, if you didn't share, are there any self-identifiers, axes of identity that you hold and you would like to share? For example, I myself am a queer Black woman, and that is something that I bring, to the forefront of a lot of the talks that I do. But not just what are some self-identifiers you may want to share, but is there a part of your identity or your specific experience that you feel makes you especially well equipped to do the work that you do? I think I've heard a little already from Itzy talking about your familial connection with the research that you do. So if you want to expand on that.
Absolutely. So to answer part of the initial question of self-identifiers, so being a Hispanic immigrant and first-generation college graduate, also first-generation scientist, is definitely part of who I am. It's not, however, essential to my full identity, but definitely I am a non-traditional female scientist with a rich, diverse background. And I think my journey in navigating the educational and financial barriers to reach the stage to where I am has definitely equipped me with the persistence and adaptability, resourcefulness, And these are qualities that are essential in the scientific research. We don't see them as a direct translation because they're just, it's like they're innate, right? They're just to have it with you, and you don't see them as, oh, these are qualities that I am bringing to. But when you think about, right, when you think back and everything that you have done, where you are, and what it has taken to be where you are, then you see this as definitely a plus. Of course, some of us wish that we didn't have to go through many things to reach that level. However, we have it, right? And it will be a waste not to use it and to channel that into what we do. And so growing up in a family that was impacted, as you mentioned, Anicca, with multiple sclerosis, also gave me a personal connection to my work. As I mentioned, what one can achieve when you have the mind and the heart, like laser focus, is something that really fuels my drive and help me develop more, help me find a way to develop more accurate models to study neurodegeneration. And so my experience, as I mentioned, as an undergrad was doing a lot of neurochemistry. In my PhD stage was a lot of neuroimmunology. And now as a postdoctoral fellow, I've been working on increasing specific cell types to make it more representative of the human brain. But also with that, I have expanded my scope of research into bioengineering. And so I think all of this makes me well equipped for what I'm doing.
That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I totally relate to like the resourcefulness kind of angle. I also grew up pretty poor. And to this day, in my research field, it's very common that people have this mindset of we need more data, we need more telescopes, we need more this, that, and the other. When in reality, there's actually so much you can do with what we have already. Mm-hmm. And so one of my greatest skills, I've been told many times over, is my resourcefulness with what we have. Because I feel like if you can't be creative with what you've been given already or what's already around you, then I don't really think we have that kind of crafty survival skill within us, that kind of that resilience, if you will. Yeah. I wish it didn't come that way, but that is ultimately the strength. Danielle, would you like to share a little bit about some of the ways that your self-identifiers or axes of identity impact your work and your passion?
Yeah, honestly, for me, I think growing up in my Anishinaabe culture really affects the way that I see the world and the way that I make the decisions that I do. In my community, we have a teaching that I grew up with, and other communities have it as well, but it's called the 7 generations teaching. And it's that everything you do, every decision you make is for the benefit of the next 7 generations. And it's with the knowledge and wisdom of 7 generations in the past. So it's not just you now making decisions, it's also having wisdom and guidance in that. And I think for me, that really does guide a lot of what I do and why I choose to work with youth and why I think doing future forward work is really important and why I think cultural preservation is really important. And then also for me, in my community, we coined a term. It's called Two-Spirit. And it's basically, a lot of people kind of conflate it with like queer identity. And there can be some overlap. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. But basically it means that we have kind of special roles in our community. And for me specifically, I won't go too much into how I personally identify, but for me, I am Two-Spirit, and it does affect a lot of the way that I show up in my community, in the way that I am a leader, and it also affects the way that I see the world around me because I have both a feminine spirit and a masculine spirit, and I think that like really affects the work that I do. It really affects the people I'm around, and I don't know, I think I see the world differently because of it. But yeah, I think both of those identities and my connection to my culture really have helped shape the work that I do, and have also helped me be able to exist within the STEM space, which can be really rigorous and horrible and disgusting sometimes. And so yeah, I think both have helped. Whenever I felt discouraged or like I can't do the work or continue, I always have my family and community to come back to and to have for support when I need it. And so yeah, I think those are the identities to me. There's many identities that I could talk about, but I think those are the ones that matter the most to me.
Thank you. Anicca, did you want to?
Yeah. Lisette, I'm not sure if you wanted to give a response to that as well, or we can go ahead and ask our last question for this section.
Yeah, I'd like to respond. I identify as a disabled Latina mother scholar. For me, those identifiers are the most salient and that I've written about in multiple peer-reviewed journals. Just talking about the benefit of a disability identity, a disability lens, and what it calls for us to think about when we think about productivity, notions of productivity and scholarship and knowledge production. And then I would also say another identifier that's not as well known, but that certainly impacts my work is my identity as a mindfulness instructor. And how it impacts my work is that I'm currently creating a new methodology that blends together contemplative practice, critical race theory, and collage making. And the hope is to use that methodology not as an extractive way of documenting the stories of marginalized scientists, but to offer a way towards mending. And I won't get into it now, but my hope is that it will help marginalized scholars to not necessarily, I mean, oftentimes we tend to focus on the barriers. And what I'm hoping is that this methodology will help to start reinvigorate Black and Brown joy and start pushing towards more visions of the future.
Thank you so much for sharing all of those wonderful experiences with us and how they impact your work. I know Lisette, my mother actually got her BS when I was a lot older. I was applying to colleges, I think, around the same time that she was finishing, something like that. And I know that watching her do that really impacted my perspective of what was possible. And I just was so proud of her. I'm sure that your child or children feel the same way. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you. I hope so. My oldest typically does mostly complaining. Like, I'm sure what he'll do as soon as we're done here is he'll be like, well, that was a long meeting. But yeah, I hope they're proud.
Sure they are. Related, okay, so you brought up joy. I really love that. I started reading a couple years ago a lot of Adrienne Marie Brown's like kind of compilations of work about joy and organizing and how that's often not brought about enough. But related to joy, our next question is we wanted to ask each of you, what is something, a title, an accomplishment, anything, an event, a community moment. It doesn't even have to be individualistic because I think a couple of y'all mentioned this, but I'm going to name it. We actively try to work against those white supremacy culture characteristics about individualism and progress over everything else. And so centering joy, centering your joy and your community, what are some of the things that you are most proud of, the accomplishments that bring you the most joy?
One of the aspects that really brought joy to what I'm doing was I taught organic chemistry at Coppin State University for a whole year. I was shadowing my teaching mentor, and it was something very important for me to see, the teaching of the professor versus what the students were truly digesting and processing from what they were being taught versus what they were really actually processing and understanding. And so when I started teaching, one of the first things that really warmed my heart is that a couple of students told me like, oh, wow, you are Hispanic and a scientist. Oh, this is great. And you're teaching, organic chemistry. So that's, a small but powerful experience to see how being a relatable mentor has an impact in the students. So that was the first big joy I had. And secondly was how after teaching a couple of classes and implementing teaching techniques, the students were actually enjoying the class and involved and engaged. And so that was really, really something that gave me joy. But after that was when they were individually approaching me to ask advice for career. And what that meant to me is that some of stated by them is that they were not able to see or beyond what they were doing is like, oh, I'm just going to graduate from college and that's it. I'm going to go for a job on this and that. But they were, so the teaching and my experience and talking to them piqued their interest into doing something else. And so that was a moment of joy and pride too, I should say.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Itzy. Danielle, would you like to go?
Yeah, I think for me, one of my favorite accomplishments and things that bring me joy every day is I invented a robot with my mentors. It's called SCOBot. SCO is reservation slang for let's go. And it's a robot that speaks endangered indigenous languages. And in my language is Anishinaabe-Moan, and it's considered an endangered language. Building that robot and creating something that could communicate and speak indigenous languages was something that was really exciting to me, and I didn't necessarily think it was possible. I saw and was inspired by, Talking Elmo. And I was like, why can't it speak indigenous languages, And for us, I think the UN estimates that there's only going to be 20 indigenous languages left by 2050, which is a ridiculous, crazy thing because there's hundreds of tribes in the US and Canada. And I felt a lot of fear from that. And so I created the robot. It looks like a little cat or bear. It sits on your shoulder and it will respond to vocal prompts in English and Spanish. And building that has been the coolest thing. I'm such a nerd about it. I built it and I was like, oh my God, how are kids going to respond to it from a speech language development kind of perspective? I took it to a powwow on its first adventure out into the world. And I saw babies looking up at the robot and kids coming up and asking for the robot to play Spider-Man music and things. And so that really excited me. I was like, oh my God, it's working. And so to me, that will forever be my favorite accomplishment out of anything I've ever done. It makes me so excited.
That's incredible.
That's so cool. Actually, can I ask a follow-up question? How did you have to do some sort of AI machine learning training in terms of the call and response, or are there packages out there that you can kind of train yourself?
Yeah, so we started with packages, but we also have our own development that we've done. Basically, there's a lot of ethical considerations when it comes to AI stuff. Yeah. And so what we did is we made it so that the vocal recognition uses AI, but the indigenous language component does not. So basically what it does is it recognizes when you're speaking to it, but then it plays an audio recording that is synced to that vocal prompt. So I could say hello to it, and it's going to say Ani Buju back, and it's going to give context to that word. And so the goal with that is that when we were speaking with elders, they wanted to make sure that the robot didn't lack context, that it wasn't being something that would replace real speakers, and it wasn't something that could manufacture words on its own, like an Alexa or something like that. And so, yeah, it recognizes the words and then syncs it up to the pre-recordings, and then we don't mess with those. And so that took 2 years to figure out the ethics on. Oh my goodness. And even as is, every single community we work with is different and wants different things. So that's just for my own language. But other programs we're doing, some people don't want any of the language resources shared, period, online. Some people in some communities, they don't want any AI integration whatsoever. It really varies depending. But yeah, it's a whole ethics adventure, which is honestly, I've learned so much, and it feels like I'm in my own research realm, even though I didn't even finish college. So it's really cool.
That's amazing. I love that it also took so long to get that together and to consult with everyone and figure it out. I feel like oftentimes not everybody, but the dominant culture in STEM is just pushing through and barreling through everything and not actually taking a beat and stepping back and actually consulting people and thinking of the ethics. It's just such a beautiful example of how that can be not only done, but then also produce something absolutely incredible. Lisette, can you please share with us something that you are proud of?
Sure. I put two of them in the chat. The first one is more of a group project. It's called Native STEM Portraits, and it's a photo elicitation study, long-term study that we did with undergraduate, graduate, and professionals in STEM who identify as Native. And we just got this website up to share a lot of the photos that our participants generated. And so if you get a chance to look at it, it's www.turk.edu/native STEM portraits. And so we have a gallery there that you can search by topic. Right now, we only have about 60-ish photos, but we have like over 200. So eventually those will get on the site. But we've been sharing them with Native communities and other communities as well. But I think we're proud of that because it was an unintended way to share the information that we were gathering with Native communities, and the positive responses from our participants and from Native communities has been really wonderful. And so we wanted to highlight the positive as well as some of the challenges of being a Native STEM person. And so that's now shared online. And then the second one is a website, signsofdisability.com, signs, SINES, which is a pun, a math pun, because my colleague, Dr. Daniel Reinholtz at San Diego State, and I created this website to begin to document the stories of disabled mathematicians, because oftentimes when we think mathematics, we kind of think able-bodied, neurotypical ways of being and thinking. And he and I wanted to counter that. And so trying to address ableism in mathematics, but also in STEM generally. So there's a collection of stories on our site, and we're always looking for more. And it's actually growing. So we're excited that it's probably going to turn into an organization soon, because we keep getting requests and commentary on the site. So we're excited about it.
That's so awesome. Maybe, we can work with VanguardSTEM and sort of cross-pollinate some of those features, some of the people that you have on your side in some of the content that we produce.
That would be awesome.
Okay, so I am going to move us into the next section where we're going to focus a little bit more on barriers to access and really how to overcome them. So the first question that I wanted to ask, and anyone can answer, is there a part of your identity or journey that you would have liked folks to be more informed about? And so in reflecting on this, as an example, this isn't a part of my identity, but it's definitely a place where I was lacking in knowledge. And so for me, I have recently started working with a lot of students who are not US citizens. And that's been a real lesson for me in their experiences, their needs, the additional requirements. I had no idea that even if you are an English-speaking person coming from another country, there may be language proficiency tests that you have to take. Of course, we all know that funding might be different, those sorts of things. And so that's something that my students and mentees have taught me in the past few years. And so I'm interested in sort of the reverse side of that for you all. What is something that you think that you could, you have taught the people around you, or that you wish that they were more informed about in the same way that my mentees have maybe been informing me in the past few years?
I think I'll take this one first. A few things that I wish people would know is that Indigenous students in the U.S. are 237% more likely to drop out of high school than their white counterparts, and that our students are also equally likely to underperform in the same rate in math. And a lot of that is due to lack of representation in academic and learning spaces, due to lack of resources, lack of funding, things like that. Also, only 18% of our rural, like tribal reservation residents have internet access, and even fewer have access to personal computers. And that's not just rural areas. A lot of that also continues into our urban communities as well. Like a lot of my students, even in Los Angeles, don't have a personal computer or Wi-Fi or things like that. And so having all of those accessibility gaps, especially when it comes to not only getting basic necessities, but also adding onto that and having a proficiency in STEM education, it can be really difficult. And a lot of people don't know that. And they judge us based on the outcome, not necessarily what leads up to it. And I wish that that was different.
I think I have a follow-up question, actually. So in line with some of those underperformance aspects, the dropout rate and sort of those things, is there a way that you have seen, this is kind of leaking into the next section, so, but I'm curious if there's a way that you've seen people maybe positively engage on or to intervene in any of those aspects?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that our community members are doing to circumvent these accessibility gaps, because it's kind of a two-pronged thing. It's stuff we can do as individuals, but a lot of it is infrastructural or has impacts from like the US or Canadian government and things like that. And it's stuff that we don't always have control over. Like I believe that the Supreme Court just ruled in Navajo Nation that water is not a right and different things like that. So we have a lot of issues kind of fighting for our rights, fighting to be seen, fighting to have our tribal sovereignty and things like that. So a lot of times it is on the individual when it shouldn't have to be able to fill in those gaps and provide the resources that we need for our community members. And I'll center it specifically on youth because that's my focus, but a lot of it is for us educators buying laptops for our students and making sure that we can get the resources into the kids' hands. Like when I educate youth, but a lot of my role is educating educators and things like that. And so when I work with teachers, oftentimes I'm not just giving away robots, I'm setting up an entire classroom infrastructure to be able to handle STEM education. So I'm sending them laptops, I'm sending them tools, I'm sending them all the materials that they would need to be able to make any of that happen. And so I'm just one small piece of that puzzle. A lot of our community members are all doing everything in their own ways, whether it be writing children's books, being artists, doing all these amazing things to help fill in those gaps where it's needed. Like over COVID, I got to be a part of a youth like literary effort to bring Indigenous children's books to Indigenous youth. In COVID, we had no internet, no school. So it's like, how are you learning? And so community members got together across all of North America and we're like, we're going to get books into kids' hands and we're going to make sure that they're fed too. And I think it's just the power of us, of our community and coming together to support and help one another. So yeah, I see examples of that everywhere I go. It's a beautiful thing.
Thank you so much for that answer. I think one thing that you said that really struck me, maybe in a different words, is that there is a system that creates these problems. And so a solution is not going to be just a single resource solution. It's creating systems that will counteract it. Like you were saying, you don't just give someone a robot and say, have fun, you're a scientist now and a robotics expert now. You have to sort of create that system to help their education as well. So does anyone else have a response? So as a reminder, the question is there a barrier to access part of your identity or journey that you would like folks to be more informed about?
I could jump in. I wish folks would understand disability better, not just the logistics of accommodations, but disability as an identity, as a culture, as something that is not necessarily a negative. I also think, particularly in STEM, there's also There are also assumptions around intellect and ability and notions of normality that I think need to be confronted, particularly when we're talking about folks with disabilities and those with impairments that are non-apparent. You know, those of us with chronic illness, I myself have chronic pain through fibromyalgia. And so understanding how the symptoms that present impact the way that we work and how we think. And I think there's a huge gap in terms of people's understanding of disability.
I totally agree with you. I am also disabled, but it's not visually apparent, or it's not apparent on the outside. And I've been pretty quiet about it through most of my journey. But now that I'm in this like kind of more senior position, I'm trying to be more public about it, since I can maybe help other people by doing that. And it's been terrifying because I feel like I have to prove it just to get any of the even the more basic accommodations that I request. And some of the accommodations that I request that feel so simple to me are so inconvenient for others. And it can be really hard to convey how important that is for me. Just something as simple as different lighting during a meeting, or maybe not having a 3-hour meeting be mandatory for everybody, or maybe scheduling breaks, things like that. Sometimes I get met with language on like, do you really need that? Because I don't think we can do that, or it'd just be really inconvenient. And then I'm stuck with this position. I'm like, oh, do I really need to not have a complete week where I'm unable to do something and unable to get off the couch? Yes, I do. And it's very difficult. I don't really have solutions. I'm learning to maybe lean into more of these actual official spaces to find more community and solutions in that way. But I agree, having a visible disability has been incredibly difficult.
Itzy, I'm not sure if you would like to answer or provide another response there.
I think something that I can obviously speak for from personal experience in my unique journey is, for instance, the having to deal with the GRE before entering grad school. And so for me, that was a barrier in terms of how intense I had to prepare. And so while previous to having an education, I have a pretty difficult life. Once I was able to have an education, I was privileged because that was the only thing I was doing. I was only studying. I didn't have to work. I didn't have a family to attend to. So my full time was 100% on studying. And so even with that, even having that privilege, having to put so much time into a GRE, having English as my second language, and learn English as an adult, something that for other folks would take 2 hours, I would take 4 hours for me, right? For instance. In addition to that, you have to pay for the GRE, and not everybody has the finances to pay for the GRE. Not everybody has the time to study for the GRE. And secondly, in my case, even though I could take the entire test, it would take a long time, right? So I have to prepare with months and months of anticipation, like many others. However, to find out that the research on this test is not an indicator of success to grad school. And so that is something that I know some schools, some universities are not implementing that as part of their acceptance package, but application package, but many others are. And so that is something that I wish people can understand and be cognizant about it. In my case, for instance, because it also affects the confidence of a student, right? So for instance, if you are working towards the same goal, you are applying to the same university, and you are unable to say finish test on time, that doesn't mean that you don't have the capacity, the intellectual ability to do a test, but you just need more time, right? But then there is a complication of, well, you don't want things to make it easier for everybody because everybody's being measure at the same time. So I think that is something that maybe we can talk in the next segment, because it's complex and it's nuanced, right? But I think that aspect is something that it's important for someone who English is their second language and is someone who, and when you learn that as an adult as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those important reminders, Itzy. It really made me think of two things. It made me think of a mentee that I have who is currently applying for PhD programs. And it feels like once a week at least, he comes to me lamenting his GPA or some of those other metrics, saying like, oh, I have such a low GPA, it's only a 3.6 and they'll never take me with this. And I always try to encourage him and remind him of exactly what you're saying, is that, first of all, that's not low, but also if you're someone reviewing applications and you're looking at, 100 GRE scores that are the same, or, 1,000 applicants that all have a 4.0, there are people who, like you were saying, it's taking you twice as long because you're having to overcome challenges that other students may not even be cognizant of, let alone have to face. And so those areas like personal statements where you're really able to articulate who you are and why you want this and what you've done to get it are so important. And so, it is a great thing to see schools relying less and less on things like GRE. I know, and this was the other thing I was thinking, when I was applying to grad school, I didn't really have anyone to ask about or to help me through that application process. And at the time, I had gone viral on Twitter a few times. And so I ended up making a GoFundMe to fund my GRE test and my applications. Yeah. And it's just, a testament to those things. Like some people, it's not even something they have to think about.
Exactly. And yeah. And you have to also, as I said, I was privileged at the time because I was part of this program that was helping with all of this, the IMSD, IMSD program. And so they were, the mentoring was in every aspect. And so we have the books. They bought the books for us to be able to do all the testing. They didn't cover the cost, but and at the end I was able to take the GRE and to have a pretty decent score. But that's not the point, right? The point is what it takes. And for somebody who had all the benefits at the time, like me, it was so incredibly stressful and intense. So what about those, right, who have to work or who are caregivers, right, or who have a family that they don't have the money and they don't have the time. They might have the intellect and the inclination, but, those are people that we are leaving out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for touching on that.
So one of these last questions we wanted to ask about, we've talked a lot about community today. And so we really wanted to explicitly call that out. And ask y'all a little bit about what role that some of your peers have played in your journey so far, positive or negative. I will say personally, I didn't really actually have peers until grad school. I actually did a math degree in my undergrad. I wish your organization, Lisette, existed back when I was an undergrad. It was a very isolating experience, but now I attribute so much of my wellness and success to my community of peers. I would not be here without them, including Anicca. They are my inspiration, to steal a quote from Anicca. I think, Anicca, you had said to us something like, your mom said, surround yourself with the people who better you. And you said, I did, or something like that. I really, really feel that. And so I'd love to hear from y'all what role some of your peers in your community have played.
Well, okay, I'm gonna jump on that. I have a mixed bag of experience, but mostly positive. When I was in one of the experience that I really think of and really warms my heart is my experience in community college, because I was surrounded by diverse group of people from age to ethnicities. A lot of people don't know, but New Mexico is one of the states with the highest diversity. And so we were always in the tutoring center, doing homework of all the sciences and working together towards, understanding a problem and getting good grades and all of that was really nice because we were supporting each other. When we were not understanding something, there was someone who was always better at something, right? Whether it was physics or chemistry or, there was that person that was really good at. And so we were all sharing what we were really good at, in addition to have this mentoring aspect in the tutoring center. And likewise, at the University of New Mexico, we were getting together in the library to study for midterms and finals and stuff like that. When I started in grad school, it was a little different and it was more isolated. As we know, the nature of academia, when you get to that level, is a whole different animal, right? It's a whole different story. And so I did not have that, sense of having this group of people who maybe we were not the best friends, but we were all working, helping each other. And so that was, however, the people at my lab, even though they were not my peers directly as my cohort, the people at my lab and other labs that I was working with, they were very supportive. My PI for my thesis, she was amazing. And I think when you have that sense of belonging, and you can give it your all, right? Doesn't matter how hard things are, but when you have that. And so with her, Katie Ward and me, we would talk about science every single day. She will be there to talk about science and, experimental design and all of that data. But she will also ask, like, how are you doing? How is your family in Mexico? How do you feel with this, political climate at the time that was quite turbulent? And so that was a very, very nice experience because while I had not this sense of connection with my cohort, I had the sense of connection to someone where I was directly working with and also with other peers in the lab.
I love that you called out also that, that more advanced person, that person you're working with. I feel like that can make such a difference, having that connection and having them see you as a whole person. I know for me, I didn't really get that until later in my career. And in those moments, I did feel like, I could fail, but still be seen as like a good scientist. I could say I needed to take time off to go see my family and still be feeling safe to do that, and that it doesn't make me any less worthy to be in these spaces. It makes such a big difference.
Yes, I was racing to unmute myself as well, Arianna. We both caught on to the same thing, and I shouldn't be surprised. But, I really wanted to emphasize what you said, Itzy, about that, as well as like your peers being there for you to have a collective experience. And I'm sure that the conversation feels a lot more open as well because you're all going through it together. But then also having a more senior person who you may not necessarily feel as open with, but that person acknowledging it's okay to ask you about things that they know are going on that are important. I know sometimes I'll show up to lab maybe like after a certain event that happened recently for our country and just feeling like very down.
Exactly.
And like, I'm the odd person out because I'm, having a bad day today. And so even just having that person to be like, hey, I heard things are tough. It might not actually change what's happening around you, but it does make you feel like maybe you're a little less out of it to feel that, your emotions in this space. Yeah.
Yeah, because we're whole people. We're not objective
Exactly.
robots.
Exactly. And also having if you need anything, please stop by, but she will stop by the lab every single day. And so that was very, very important. So I would imagine that without that support and having the disconnection with my peers at the time, it would have been very rough.
For me, my peers mean absolutely everything to me. Like, my organization wouldn't exist without them because we're completely youth run, which is so cool. Every single invention I've made or every single project I've done or anything we've ever done for the youth or things my organization has accomplished has all been done by me and by people who are my age, which is so exciting. It feels very empowering, and it feels nice to be able to walk into a room and know that a bunch of people have your back and they understand where you're coming from, and you don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to constantly give context to why you're making the decisions that you're making, or how your upbringing affected your decision making the way that it did, or things like that. Like, everyone just gets it. And I think that that's like it's a relief. And I feel the same way when I work with my students who are younger than me. It's the exact same thing. They all get it. And I feel I would much rather be in a classroom than I would be in any like corporate or technical space or anything. Like, it's so much more fun and it has so much more energy, you know? And I think for me, I didn't always necessarily have that supportive space because when I got to public high school, I had to save up for 2 years, and I was finally able to be a part of the robotics team. But when I got there, I was the only girl, and so I was met with like just a ton of guys who didn't want me there. And they made that known. They were like, you need to quit. STEM isn't meant for women, all of those things. And it felt really isolating. They would harass me, sexually harass as well, and even sent drones to spy on me in my house. And that was all just such a terrifying experience, and one that made me feel very alone. I was like, even my peers who are interested in the same things that I'm interested in, there's not that connection there. They're really mean with it. And so I forever thought that I wasn't going to be welcomed in STEM. And what I realized is I was just looking in the wrong place. And so once I found the people who supported me, and I found especially other young Indigenous femmes and women in STEM from across Canada and the US, I just felt so much better. I felt like, oh my God, I can actually learn things, and it's okay to admit that when you don't know things, and it's okay to ask questions, and it's okay to be yourself and bring your full self to the table. And so once I found everyone, it is a beautiful, beautiful thing.
That's lovely. I love the part where you mentioned and continue to talk about how you don't have to explain those parts of yourself. I feel like that really trickles into so many different axes of identity. I mean, when Anicca and Geraldine and I get together in person, and we're like the three leads of VanguardSTEM at this point, it's wild. Like, in 1 minute we'll be, I don't know, talking about our hair and our dreads, and then the next minute someone will be breaking down some complex biological concept to me, and like there's no hesitation, no like weirdness about it. You just get to like fully discuss it and be yourself. And I'm glad you found that space too. I wanted to ask, and like at an angle of has this even happened? Is this even possible? You're entirely youth led. I'm wondering, have you gotten any support from like directly from people who are perhaps a little bit more advanced or senior? And do they respect, that you are youth led and autonomous, and do they really celebrate you in that way?
So I love that question. I feel like a lot of people don't ask that to youth organizations, and I feel like people should, because I think it reveals kind of a larger issue of how people perceive us. But so for us, our organization, we have a board of elders who oversee what we're up to. We have a board of youth who oversee what we're up to. And coincidentally, they're all girls, which is fantastic. And they're all like high school age, middle of high school. And then we also have advisors who are over the age of 25 who help us more hands-on, but they defer to youth. So we have people who are experts in different things when we need those experts, who can help us with stuff, which I like because we do not know everything and we need help. But that being said, people do not associate youth with any level of technical proficiency or leadership. And so that has been a disadvantage for my organization, and it has been something that we've had to fight. Up until like 2 years ago, everyone would refer to me as a volunteer. So they would always say like, oh, the robotics volunteer, STEM volunteer. They would never use the words like a designer or inventor, ever. And that was really discouraging. I was like, just because I'm this age, like, why does that matter? And even now, when applying for funding or other things, when we're up against people who have been in this for many years, it can be very difficult to fight for that, even though we have a level of technical proficiency that's at the same level, if not even sometimes higher than other technical organizations. So it can be really intimidating, And so I think it can be a disadvantage sometimes to be a youth organization. An advantage in how we connect to the youth and the community, disadvantage on every other sphere on how people recognize us. But it wasn't until MIT Solve made a documentary about me that finally people were like, oh, technical expert. And I was like, oh, wow, that took so long. Like, oh my goodness, I've been doing this for so many years. And I built so many robots and I've done these things. And it felt like only then when an institution recognized what I was doing, people then recognized that. And that was very discouraging because it's the exact same work. And I wish people's perspective about that would change. So yeah.
Yeah, that was the answer I expected, and that's what I was wondering. It's great that you found like a board that seems to respect the flow. But yeah, I totally hear the part where it's like you need this kind of external recognition before anyone takes you seriously, which is really, I mean, again, I will harp on this forever. It's another aspect of the white supremacy culture that is just so pervasive everywhere. Really disappointing. But again, I'm glad you found that community. Lisette, I believe, the question was, what role have your peers played in your journey so far?
I've always been so interdisciplinary, I've never really had a group of peers really to connect with. Like, I can kind of connect with folks, but not really. It's always been kind of off. But I think when I acquired my disability and found the disability activist community, that's when I kind of felt like home. And similar to what Danielle was saying and Itzy was saying in terms of not having to explain yourself and all being on the same page in terms of negotiating access needs and kind of supporting each other when our spoons are running low. Like, I feel like there's in the disability community, there's more understanding and compassion because they humanize things in a way that a lot of other spaces try to deny. So I feel more comfortable now with the disability community, and I feel more comfortable self-identifying as being disabled. And I wish that all people could find that kind of brave space, that safe space that they could truly be themselves in.
Yeah, something that always strikes me about being in disabled corners is I don't think people often realize, at least in many different ways, that like it's a community that you may find yourself in later and you don't know it, but it may be coming. And I always find that very interesting that people think it's exclusive of themselves, when in reality, I think it's something we should all participate in for that reason. Thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts and experiences. So we have one last question, and it is, where have past attempts at positive action stalled or go wrong? What are lessons you think that folks can learn about trying to be advocates or allies? So I'll give an example of this that I experienced. So I was in an IMSD program, which is initiatives for maximizing student development, specifically geared towards minoritized students, as a grad student. And they supported the first 2 years, I believe, of our graduate education, including the time that we were supposed to be rotating through labs. And one thing that we found was that oftentimes students would be in labs where the advisors perpetuated some of these white supremacist ideals, were ultimately not very inclusive, or they felt they didn't belong. And then the IMSD group wanted to course correct with training for faculty afterwards. And so one thing that was suggested to this group was, well, students are rotating their first up to 2 years and you are sponsoring those years. Maybe what you should do is have, we had monthly meetings. Maybe these meetings should be catered around how to find a good lab, what questions to ask the PI so that you can sort of evaluate these things as you're going through the rotation process. Maybe we should create interventions so that students don't end up in labs like this, rather than trying to atone for it after they have. So I'm just interested if you've experienced something that was maybe intended to help that wasn't quite so helpful, and a suggestion that you could give for someone maybe running a program or involved in one now.
who may be listening to this episode?
Well, this may deviate a little bit from the core of the question, but it's related. We need to fix a problem with rhetoric. So what I have noticed is that sometimes the way people think about the obstacles that we talk about, that the obstacles that we face, that these are somehow cries for making things easier, which cannot be for the true, right? So in my case, I've always experienced this sense of wanting things to be equal, that I want to be measured against the same metric and show that I'm just as good as anyone, right? But an example of this is when I was talking about language, right? So for instance, for me I did very well academically, but it took a long time, right? And as I mentioned, I was privileged that at the time, the only thing I was doing was focus 100% of my education. But for instance, in order to do very well, I went to school. Obviously, I have to study, but then I have to review my recordings, which was like 3 hours of material per class. And so when I talked with professors, like, how can I, because I will take exam and I will use most of the time. Yes, I will have a good grade, but, it was so stressful because it's like, oh my God, the hour of the 50 minutes or whatever time was. And so they will offer me extra time. They will say like, well, why don't you have 30 minutes extra? But I didn't feel comfortable because it's like, well, people will think that I have it easier, right? That they're doing a favor to me. And why is not the same case for everyone else? So I didn't take it. I found other strategies to improve my how fast I would answer questions, how fast I would understand the questions, because it's not the topic, right? It's the language that was the issue. And so I'm bringing this as an example because what we need to do when we're talking about implementing strategies is that we need to make abundantly clear that what we are in need is a mentoring system that takes all of this into consideration and to help all of the above. And so to prepare students not only to be intellectually at par, but also psychologically. And I think most importantly, we need to teach confidence. That's where I think we need as an implemented strategy. We don't want things to be different for people who have obstacles, but we need strategies that can help students overcome those obstacles and be measured with the same metrics. And I think confidence is at the heart.
Yeah, thank you for that response, Itzy. I think what you're talking about is like really the pedagogy, like being culturally responsive, culturally aware as a baseline, and that being informative of how we then approach some of these obstacles. As you're saying, the goal is not to, like you said, make things easier, so to speak, but it is to make sure that everyone is at level footing, sort of the difference between equity versus equality there.
Okay.
I loved so much what Itzy said. And what I love about everyone in this room is that we're leaders in our communities and we're solving problems, but we're solving problems that we're connected to and relate to, and that we bring forth into the way that we solve problems. I think when I get approached by people, they often ask me, they're like, oh my gosh, like, how do I become a problem solver? How do I make change? And sometimes that takes a direction of people trying to solve problems that they don't have experience with, or stepping into communities that they're not from. And I think that can be very dangerous, especially in Indigenous communities. What we see a lot of times is people who are non-Indigenous coming into our communities and saying that they know how to help us and that they know what to do. But a lot of times we already know what we need to do. We just need the support to be able to do it. And so I always encourage people, when they want to solve problems, when they want to do things for good, when they want to help people, to start with what they know and just start with the problems that they see around them, that they grew up with. And it's something that I feel like, especially in youth spaces, it comes up a lot because people are kind of in the panicked phase of getting into college or getting into, like a master's program, getting jobs, things like that, and are kind of on a rush for maybe opportunities. Maybe they do want to help, but oftentimes that can end up hurting people. Kind of in a similar vein, in the tech world, there's a phrase called "move fast and break things," kind of in the idea of moving quickly and focusing on improvement and innovation over all else will lead to better things. But when they say that, I don't think they realize that when you say break things, what you're breaking is actually people and communities. And that moving slowly, moving with ethical decision making, moving with community rooted decision making, all these things are very, very important. And I want people, when they want to solve problems, they want to help people to think of those things. And so what Itzy said reminded me of that. And I wanted to share that here as well, because I think everyone can benefit in their own capacity.
I completely agree with what Danielle shared. And going also, Itzy's comments reminded me of the assumptions people make about disabled students and scientists in terms of the accommodation process. So one thing is accommodations need to be provided because it's by law. So faculty out there who think, oh, you're decreasing the rigor of my class and all those other comments, it's the law that you have to follow. Uh, so just FYI. Also, in terms of accommodations, I know one solution that people often say is universal design for learning, which I'm all for. If you can implement that in your classrooms, that would be great. But just a reminder that universal design or inclusive design, which I would prefer, they are not a panacea. Like, there are impairments that are still going to need accommodations. So don't assume that just because you're implementing universal design that you have everything solved and you don't have to provide accommodations. That's not true. And all that to say is that the Revised Center is trying to kind of educate informal STEM practitioners and researchers about not just accommodations, but providing accessible and inclusive communication. So if you want to learn more about what we're doing, as well as how to do it yourself, you can go to the informalscience.org website and do a quick search for accessible, inclusive communication. And that'll give you our resource page that'll assist with that.
Thank you, Lisette. We'll definitely give links and shout outs to everybody's orgs and anything else y'all have shared when we're doing the edit. I also wanted to second what you said, Lisette, because I just started my faculty position this year and I got this influx, of course, of disability accommodations. And the thing that really struck me was there's this section where I have to write in detail how the student will make up the work that they missed. And I couldn't get behind the fact, like the idea of assigning more work to someone who was chronically ill or what have you, and it's just more on their plate. And I had students approach me because I hadn't filled it out yet because I was just so struck by it. It took me a minute to really process it. And I had students approach me and say, hey, we have to fill out this form. We both have to sign it. So what do I do if I miss class? How do I make up work? And the only thing I could find myself saying is, I'm not interested in punishing you for being disabled. Please reach out to your peers if you need help with learning what was missed. And if you want to learn more, come to my office hours, but I'm not going to assign you extra work because you're disabled. Where's the math?
That's funny, not funny. But also I feel bad for students because it's an every semester process, going to every faculty member and having to ask for things that a lot of times could easily be remedied by the faculty member. So it is what it is right now.
Yeah, we can only do what we can right now.
Right.
So thank you so much to our panelists for having this incredible conversation. I learned so much from all of you. I know we have so many incredible resources to share with our community as well. Thank you also to Lyda Hill, IFVEN, and AAAS for sponsoring this web series episode. And I wish I had something wise to say to sign us off, but I feel like the panelists have all already done it. So thanks for watching this episode of On the Vanguard. Peace out.